The kitchen was a world of heat, steel, and motion, and Sophie Laurent moved through it like she belonged to it more than anywhere else on earth. Flames burst up as pans hit burners, knives flashed beneath her hands, and the scent of truffle oil, rosemary, and slow-braised beef filled the air. Orders came in sharp, rapid bursts, but her mind was calm. The kitchen made sense. Ingredients made sense. Flavor obeyed rules. People did not. She slid a plated lamb loin across the counter, garnished with a precise sprig of charred thyme. The sous chef whistled low. "You could be running your own Michelin place, Sophie." She didn't look up, simply wiped her hands on her apron. Michelin stars cost money, a name, a reputation. She gave him a faint, wry smile. "I didn't inherit any of that." Her tone made clear the conversation was over. And it was. Everyone in this kitchen knew her story, or at least the parts she allowed them to know. Foster homes, orphanage, scholarships, sleepless nights working double shifts to pay rent on a room barely large enough to turn around in. She had clawed her way into the culinary world with nothing but skill, stubbornness, and a refusal to give up. But the people who would eat this meal tonight, the ones laughing above crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors, would never know her name. She was staff, background, invisible. That was fine, or at least it had always been fine. Sophie stepped out of the kitchen only to deliver one last dish herself, the private tasting course for the event host. The hotel corridors were a maze, of velvet carpets and soft golden light, muffled music drifting from the ballroom ahead. She balanced the tray easily and turned a corner, and walked straight into him. The tray wobbled, her breath caught. A hand extended to steady it, and her. He was taller than she expected, broader. Dark hair swept back with effortless precision, a dark tailored suit fitting his frame like it was sewn onto him. His jaw was clean-cut, his expression unreadable, but his eyes, God. His eyes were deep and quiet and devastating, like still water that hid something far below the surface. Julian Hayes. She knew who he was instantly. Everyone did. Headlines, magazines, financial reports. The man whose decisions shifted the stock market. A king in a world filled with pawns. His gaze held hers, steady, unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world to look at her. "Careful," he murmured, his voice low enough that it felt like a touch. "Those plates are worth more than the chandelier in the ballroom." Sophie found her voice, though it felt like it had to claw its way up her throat. "Only because people think price equals value." Something flickered across his expression. Interest, amusement, surprise, before the calm mask returned. "You're not like the others," he said simply. She didn't know whether to laugh or run. "I'm not one of them." "No," he said, still watching her as though seeing more than she wanted revealed. "You're not." It should have been an ordinary exchange. A moment. Nothing more. So why did it feel like they had both stepped too close to something neither of them knew how to handle? A voice called his name from the ballroom. Julian didn't look away from her until the very last second. As soon as he stepped into the golden light of the gala, the crowd swallowed him, orbiting him like stars around a sun. Sophie stood alone in the corridor again. Her hands were steady on the tray. Her heartbeat was not. She had spent her whole life learning how to be unseen. But for one impossible stolen moment, someone saw her. The night after the gala tasted like rain and unanswered questions. Sophie stood alone on the back steps of the Grand Meridian Hotel apron, wrinkled hair coming loose from the knot she had forced it into at dawn. The city moved around her relentless and glittering and full of lives that would never touch hers, but hers had already been touched, shifted, changed in a way she did not dare speak aloud. The memory of Julian Hayes stayed with her like warmth cupped between two hands, the way his eyes had held hers steady, as if he recognized something in her, something she did not even know she carried. She returned home to her one-room apartment small enough to cross in 4 steps. She sat on the bed, her chef white still smelling of rosemary and smoke, her hands trembling though she had not noticed it before. She did not believe in fate or destiny, or moments that rewrite the future, but she believed in truth, and the truth was simple. She had been seen. The next morning arrived with no mercy. She woke before the sun and walked into the kitchen where the staff moved like tides. Pans clattered, steam rose, orders began, but conversations stopped when she entered. Heads turned, eyes followed her like whispers made of breath. They had seen the cameras, the small clip circulating online. Julian Hayes pausing in the ballroom doorway, looking back, looking for someone. The chef beside her leaned close, voice low. He was asking for you, right there in the middle of everyone. He asked where you went. Sophie felt something inside her chest, tighten, expand, break. Open, a silent bloom of something terrifying and tender. She kept her face still, hands steady on the cutting board. But the world had shifted in a way that could not be undone. Later that afternoon, a black car waited outside the service entrance, sleek, silent, unmistakable. The driver spoke her name gently. Miss Laurent. Mr. Hayes requests your company for supper. Not demands, not summons, requests. Something in her lungs refused to move. She stepped into the car because she could not do anything else. Because something in her had already decided the night he looked at her. The penthouse was high above the city, a world built of glass and air. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, suit jacket, discarded sleeves rolled up as though even luxury was something that could be shed. He turned when she entered, not with surprise but with certainty, as if he already knew she would come. You are difficult to forget, he said. No theatrics, no charm, only truth. She wanted to speak, to ask why, to ask how, but words scattered like flour in her hands. Instead, she stepped closer. Slowly, as if nearing the edge of something vast, he watched her the way a man watches a storm. Not with fear, but with awe. She had spent her whole life fighting to be enough. And here was a man who had everything, seeing her as though she was the only thing in the room. The city lights flickered below them, alive, breathing, listening. His voice was quiet when he spoke again, careful, measured as if the wrong words could ruin something fragile and forming. I would like to know you. Sophie, she realized in that moment, that this was not the beginning of a romance but the beginning of a war between who she had been and who she might become, between the world that ignored her and the world watching now, between fear and something terrifyingly close to love. She took a breath and stepped toward him, choosing the unknown, choosing him, choosing herself. Word travels faster than truth in this city, and overnight, Sophie became something she never asked to be a rumor. The staff whispered it in hallways. The investors murmured it behind crystal glasses. The socialites sharpened it into something weaponized. The billionaire has taken an interest in the girl from the kitchen. Sophie tried to ignore it, tried to keep her head down. Hand steady, knife. Clean. But the world had already shifted and gravity had new rules. The kitchen doors swung open that evening, and the event coordinator entered, heels clicking like tiny hammers, eyes bright with the thrill of gossip. She stopped in front of Sophie, her smile sharp, polished, too sweet. So we are sending you out to the dining floor tonight. The host made a special request to see the chef who prepared the dinner. Sophie felt every heartbeat like a drum in her throat. She knew who the host was. Everyone did. Julian Hayes for a moment. She almost stepped back, almost said, no. almost chose safety. But she remembered the way he looked at her. Not like an ornament. Not like a charity project, but like someone who could hold her own shadow. She wiped her hands, straightened her jacket, and walked. The dining room was gold light and low music, laughter floating like perfume, wealth displayed in every gesture. There he was seated, at the head of the table, sleeves rolled again, as if luxury did not restrain him. His eyes lifted the moment she entered, as if he had been waiting for exactly that breath, that step, that fraction of a second. Sophie Laurent, he said, not loudly, not theatrically, but the entire room heard it, because the world always listens when power speaks softly. She approached the table, felt eyes rake her way, measure her against their currency and bloodlines. Julian stood, and for a heartbeat, the room froze. "Thank you for the meal," he said to her, but his voice held something deeper, a private language spoken in plain sight. "You exceeded every expectation." The woman beside him shifted. Expensive diamonds, expensive confidence, expensive hunger for ownership. Isabelle, former business partner, almost something more once, and very aware she had been replaced. She smiled at Sophie. "Sharp enough to cut glass. You must be very talented," she said. "Considering your background." The word background was a blade polished, aimed, and thrown. Sophie did not flinch. She simply turned her gaze to Julian, and the smallest tilt of her chin said everything. "I will not break. Not for her. Not for this world. Not for what they think I am." Julian saw it, and something in him changed, still went fierce. Dinner continued, but tension threaded the air like fine silk, a quiet war beginning beneath candlelight. And Crystal. Sophie left the table when her duty was done, but as she turned the corner back toward the kitchen, she felt footsteps behind her. Warm fingers wrapped around her wrist, gentle but unyielding. Sophie Julian's voice breathed her name like a secret. This is only the beginning, and she knew he did not mean romance. He meant the storm that was about to come for both of them, and the choice they would have to make between surviving separately or burning together. Sophie woke before dawn, but not because of her alarm. Her phone was buzzing over and over, a flood of messages lighting the screen. Her coworkers, her suppliers even, her landlord sending the same Linka photo. Grainy, stolen, but unmistakable. Julian Hayes standing beside her in the dining hall, his body angled toward her, his gaze not polite, not professional, but intent, focused, hungry, the caption the billionaire and the chef. The internet had already decided the rest by the time she stepped into the kitchen. The world was watching, whispers clung to her like steam. They stared not with curiosity but calculation, as though trying to solve her value in dollars and desirability. She kept her head forward, hands steady, work precise, but something inside her chest felt too full. A heartbeat, expanding against ribs not built to hold it. Julian arrived an hour before sunset, not to the dining hall, but to the kitchen, a move that shattered every rule of hierarchy in that building. Conversations died. Silence swept through stainless steel and simmering sauces as he walked straight to her station. "We need to talk," he said. Not a demand, a request. But it carried weight, like thunder. She removed her apron. Her pride did not allow her to look overwhelmed, but the tremor in her pulse betrayed her. They stepped outside into the alleyway behind the hotel. The city hummed around them. Cars moving, sirens, distant neon flickering. Like restless heartbeat, "You are being targeted," he said as simply as he might. "State the weather targeted," she echoed. "Because of you, because of us," he corrected. Sophie almost laughed. Not bitter, but unbelieving us. There was an us. Now a word too large, too heavy, too dangerous. "Isabelle is behind it," he continued. "She saw you at the table. She recognized something before either of us admitted it, and she will not let it go." Quietly. Sophie felt cold, move through her like a slow river. Not fear clarity, so. "What happens now?" she asked. His gaze held hers unwavering. "Steady the way a man looks when he has already made a decision that will change everything. I invited you to the Hayes Foundation Gala. He said tonight as my guest." The words were simple, but the meaning was not. The gala, a room full of wealth and legacy and power. The place where reputations were crowned or torn apart. A stage for the elite to measure loyalty in blood. "You want to put me in their world," she said. "Quiet me who grew up counting. Every meal me. Who stitched my own clothes. Me who learned to survive by not being seen." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the gravity of him. "I want you beside me. Not behind. Not hidden. Not small beside." Her chest tightened. Her heart rebelled. Her past screamed. Run, her future whispered stay. The silence between them was not empty. It was alive. Finally, she spoke. "I will go." Not because she belonged, but because she refused to let anyone decide where she did not. And in that moment, Julian Hayes did something no one had seen him do. Not in boardrooms, not in interviews, not in any public sphere, he exhaled. Not with relief, but with something almost like wonder. The storm had not begun, but the sky had already darkened. Tonight, the ballroom would not be a place of wealth, but a battlefield. And Sophie was no longer entering as the invisible girl from the kitchen. She was entering like a flame, and the world would learn what happens when fire stops trying to be small. The night of the gala arrived like a held breath, the city glowing with its own kind of hunger. Sophie stood in front of the mirror in the quiet of her small apartment, the dress she had sewn herself falling over her like poured wine and moonlight, no diamonds, no labels, no borrowed luxury. Just her unapologetic reflection stared back with something she had never seen before. Not pride, not fear, something sharper, a kind of unbreakable calm. She remembered every foster home, every dismissal, every time someone decided she was small. Forgettable, replaceable. Tonight she would not shrink. The car arrived sleek and silent. Julian waited inside his suit. Dark, his posture controlled, but his eyes, they softened the moment they found her. There it was again, that look, as though she was something rare, something found, not chosen, but meant. She stepped in the city lights sliding across the windows, like stars caught in glass. When they arrived at the Hayes Foundation Gala, the cameras were already waiting. Flashes burst, like lightning, voices rose like waves. The crowd parted around Julian as though he was gravity itself. But tonight their eyes were not only on him, they were on her. The whispers began immediately, not hidden, not subtle. They were too certain of their own power to whisper quietly. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why her? How dare she? Sophie kept her spine straight, her chin tall, her heartbeat steady. If they wanted to see her, then they would see her. Julian guided her through the golden archway. Into the ballroom, music swelled crystal chandeliers, shimmered like constellations caught in ceilings of glass. Sophie felt their stares like cold fingers, but she did not break. Then Isabel appeared, dressed in silver, sharp as a blade, her smile polished and poisonous, her eyes glittering with the satisfaction of someone who has prepared a trap. Sophie. She purred. What an unexpected surprise. Sophie met her gaze unblinking, neutral, steady. Julian did not release Sophie's hand, not even for a second. Isabel stepped closer, her voice sweet enough to rot. Teeth, tell me, how does it feel to arrive at an event like this, knowing you have nothing in common with anyone here? No pedigree, no family name, no legacy. Sophie felt the sting, but not the wound. She spoke, softly, but her words did not tremble. I build my legacy with my hands, with my work, with my life, while others inherit theirs and waste it. A hush swept around them, eyes widened, mouths parted. Julian looked at her, then not like he was witnessing bravery, but like he was witnessing destiny. Isabel's smile vanished, replaced by something cold, fragile cracking, and that was when the music shifted. The lights dimmed, and someone stepped onto the stage at the front of the ballroom, the host preparing to speak, but no one was listening. Because in that silent, charged moment, every person in that room knew. This was no longer a gala, it was a fault line, and something was about to break. Sophie felt it in her bones, something gathering, tightening about, to strike. And the night was far from done. The host began to speak, but the room was not listening. Something electric buzzed beneath the music, beneath the polished smiles, beneath the glitter and gold. Sophie felt it like a storm rolling toward. Sure, Julian stood beside her, close enough for warmth, not close enough to shield her, because he knew she did not need shielding. Isabel moved again, slow, deliberate, as if the entire ballroom were her stage. She lifted a crystal glass, a perfect gesture, a spotlight catching every diamond, every calculated angle of her face. "Ladies and gentlemen," she called out, voice bright and ringing, like a bell meant to summon attention. The crowd turned hungry, expectant. "I thought we should all extend a most gracious welcome to our newest guest this evening." She extended her hand toward Sophie with a smile that was not a smile at all. Sophie Laurent, renowned for her humble beginnings, her words slipped like silk soaked in venom. Humble became a blade, beginnings became a wound, gasps fluttered like birds trapped in crystal cages. Isabel continued, never breaking eye contact raised by the state, passed between homes. No family name, no legacy to speak of. The ballroom watched 1,000 eyes, 1,000 quiet judgments, 1,000 unspoken sentences. Sophie felt the memory of every door ever slammed, every whisper of "you do not belong" every moment. She forced herself not to cry in bathrooms and alleyways and quiet corners. But she did not bow her head. Isabel smiled wider, the kill strike prepared. And of course we cannot forget the most interesting detail. She once worked for Lorenzo Bianchi. The room froze. Bianchi. The name that meant scandal crime, federal investigations, the kind of association that could ruin a reputation in seconds. Sophie's breath caught not in guilt, but in outrage, because Isabel was twisting truth into poison. She opened her mouth to speak, but Isabel leaned forward. Her voice soft, intimate, meant only for Sophie. Yet somehow, heard by all, a billionaire always needs a charity project, doesn't he? The room exhaled a slow, cruel sigh, like satisfaction in witnessing someone else's breaking. Sophie felt heat rise behind her eyes, but not tears fire. The fire of every year she had survived what should have destroyed her. She lifted her chin, and silence spread. Not the silence of fear, the silence of power reclaiming itself. But before Sophie could speak, before words could ignite the flames rising in her chest, a voice cut through the ballroom, low, steady, unshakable. "That is my wife you are speaking about." The crowd turned, every head, every gaze, every whisper swallowed in an instant. Julian Hayes stepped forward, not like a man defending someone fragile, but like a king, defending his equal. His presence hit the room like a storm breaking open the sky. He reached for Sophie's hand, not to claim her, but to stand with her beside. Never above. Gasps rippled, shock rolled like thunder, cameras flashed. The world shifted in real time. The billionaire had spoken, and every lie, every whisper, every attempt to make her small, collapsed like glass under the weight of truth. Sophie did not hide. She did not tremble. She did not lower her eyes. She looked straight at Isabel, and, in the quiet that followed, the entire ballroom understood. Sophie Laurent was not the charity, not the decoration, not the rumor. She was the storm, and the night was far from over. The ballroom did not breathe. Not a single glass clinked. Not a single whispered word dared to rise. Julian stood with Sophie's hand, in his steady unmoving, a force that could shift the shape of the night itself. His voice carried without effort, without volume, because power does not need to shout. "You speak about her as though she is lesser, He looked at Isabel, then not with anger, but with disappointment, the kind that wounds far deeper than rage. Isabel's painted smile faltered just for a second, but the room saw it, and that was enough. Sophie could feel every heartbeat in her fingers, but her breath was even grounded as, though something inside her had finally clicked into its rightful place. She was not hiding, not shrinking, not apologizing. She lifted her chin, and the room followed her movement as if gravity had changed allegiance. "I am not ashamed of where I came," from Sophie said, her voice quiet, steady, but carrying like music through glass. Her words did not tremble, not once. "I am proud of every meal I made street-side to survive, every scholarship I fought for, every night I worked until dawn to stay alive. I earned myself." A hush swept the ballroom. Not judgment, something else. Something like respect. Unwilling, but undeniable. Isabel tried to laugh, but it came out cracked thin. Not the polished weapon she intended. "Very moving," she said, though her voice no longer matched her expression. "Perhaps the billionaire has a taste for charity after all." Julian stepped closer, but Sophie reached out just a touch, just 2 fingers, and he stopped. She would fight her own battles tonight. Sophie looked at Isabel, not with hate, but with a calm that felt like truth. "You think love is measured by status, by pedigree, by whispers, by the approval of people who hollow themselves out to feel superior." Her gaze did not waver, but love is not something you inherit or buy or perform. Love is chosen. The room stilled, frozen in a moment too fragile to shatter, and Julian, her voice softened, is not a man who chooses lightly. Julian's breath left him in a slow, silent exhale, his eyes on Sophie as if the entire world had vanished except for her. It was then, in that breath, in that stillness, that something shifted in the room. People who had come expecting scandal found themselves witnessing something sacred. Isabel opened her mouth, perhaps to strike once more, perhaps to defend her pride. But before a sound escaped her, the lights flickered. Not once, but twice, as though the building itself was adjusting to a change in pressure. Then a voice crackled from the speaker system. Urgent, strained. "Mr. Hayes, you need to come with us at once." Security matter gasps burst like breaking glass, heads turned, the atmosphere fragmenting. Security rushed toward Julian, but Sophie stepped instinctively in front of him without hesitation, without thought, as if her body moved faster than fear. The head of security leaned close, his voice barely above a breath. "It is about Bianca." He knows. Sophie felt her heart stop, everything freezing time, tightening into a single point. Julian's eyes locked with hers. "He knows about you." The room began to move, chairs scraping, voices rising, curiosity turning into a pulse of panic. Sophie's world narrowed to the weight of Julian's hand in hers, the quiet, steady warmth of it, the grounding truth of that touch. Whatever storm was coming, they were already standing in the center of it, and the night was no longer a battlefield of whispers, but a war of survival. Sophie did not look away. Neither did Julian. Their fingers tightened together. The world had just shifted again, and this time it would not shift back. The ballroom dissolved into movement. Bodies shifting, voices rising, security pressing inward like a tightening ring. Julian kept Sophie's hand in his, not gripping, not pulling, but grounding. As though if he let go, the floor itself might give way. They were escorted through a side corridor, gold and crystal replaced by concrete and steel, the air cooler, quieter, heavy with something unspoken. Sophie's pulse pounded in her ears, but her steps did not falter. The head of security walked ahead of them. His voice controlled each word, measured with deliberate care. "Bianchi has resurfaced. He has information. Someone gave him access to your private files, to your personal life, to her." The last word hung in the hallway. A weight, a threat, a blade sharpened by intention. Julian's jaw tightened, but his hand around Sophie did not tremble. They entered a private room, dimly lit walls lined with screens, live feeds of the gala still glowing like distant stars. Sophie watched herself on one of the monitors standing beneath the chandelier, chin-raised, eyes steady. It felt like looking at another woman, someone she had only recently become, someone she was still learning how to hold. A man stepped forward, older. Sharp suit, sharp gaze, a strategist, not a soldier. "Julian," he said, his voice low. Controlled Bianca sent a message. We intercepted it before it hit the press. He slid an envelope across the table. No dramatic flourish. No hesitation. Julian opened it. Inside were photographs. Sophie, younger, thinner, eyes tired from nights without rest, standing outside the emergency wing of a hospital, speaking to a man with the unmistakable posture of influence and danger. The caption that would have accompanied those photos could destroy reputations in seconds. Sophie's stomach clenched, not from shame, but from memory. That was the year she worked 2 jobs. The year her foster sister was dying. The year Bianca offered help, wrapped in chains. She had refused. She had walked away, but not before someone captured the moment. That could be turned into a lie. Julian looked at her, not questioning, not accusing, but searching. "Tell me," he said, not demanding, inviting. Sophie breathed once deep. "Steady, I was desperate." She said, "I was 19. My foster sister was dying. We had no insurance, no support. I thought he could help." Her voice did not break, but her hands curled into fists at her sides. "He offered money but wanted me in return. I left. I walked away. I never took anything from him." The room held its breath. Julian stepped closer too, her close enough that there was no space between their voices. "Look at me," he said. "She did. You did nothing wrong. Not a whisper of doubt, not a shadow of hesitation." His words landed like shelter, like home. The strategist cleared his throat. "Bianca is using this to imply you were bought, that the relationship was transactional, that she is your liability, your weakness." Julian's expression shifted. Not anger. Something colder. Something lethal. Sophie placed her hand on his chest, just over his heartbeat, feeling its steady, powerful rhythm. "No," she said, "I will not let this turn me into something I am not. We face it. We answer it. We do not hide. Not again." Her voice had changed, stronger, full alive. Julian exhaled. Not with relief, but with recognition. "You are not my weakness," he said. "You are the thing that makes me impossible to break." The strategist looked between them. A new plan forming, one that did not involve silence or retreat. "Then we do it publicly," he said. "We go to the press first. We control the narrative. You speak together." Sophie did not look away, did not falter, did not fear. The girl the world tried to overlook was gone. In her place stood a woman who would no longer be erased. And the night was no longer about survival. It was about uprising. Morning did not come gently. It broke across the city like a blade, light cutting through glass towers, sirens echoing down narrow streets. A city waking hungry. Sophie stood in front of the mirror in Julian's penthouse. The city spread out beneath her like a kingdom she did not ask to rule. Her reflection was not the same woman who had walked into the gala. She was sharper now, steadier, like steel tempered by fire. She touched the fabric of her dress, simple, strong, chosen. Julian entered silently. No suit. Today, black shirt sleeves rolled, prepared not for business but for battle. He looked at her, not as something to protect, but something he could stand beside without fear. "Are you certain?" he asked. Not as a challenge, but as a vow. Sophie nodded once. The world had taken its shot. She would answer. The drive to the press conference felt like moving through the eye of a storm. Reporters waited like vultures clothed in silk. Cameras lifted flashbulbs sharp as lightning. Security formed a wall. But Julian refused to walk ahead. He placed his hand in hers, and they stepped forward together. When they reached the podium, the noise was thunder. Questions thrown like stones. Accusations disguised as curiosity. Voices layered with greed, envy, violence. Sophie lifted her hand. The room fell still. The world leaned in. I have nothing to hide. Her voice was clear, steady, unshaken. I was born without privilege, without a name to carry me. I have survived without help, without safety, without the luxury of fairness. She did not flinch, not once. I met Bianca only once. He offered help at a price. No person should ever be asked to pay. I walked away. I chose my dignity, even when survival would have been easier. The cameras captured every breath, every flicker of truth. But let me make something very clear. I am not ashamed of what I endured, nor where I come from, because I built myself. The silence was absolute. A silence made of changed minds. Julian stepped forward, then not to overshadow her, but to stand in the place. He belonged at her side. Sophie is not my weakness, he said. She is my equal. You speak of power, but power is nothing without a reason to fight. She is mine. The room erupted, but the noise did not touch them. They turned ready to leave, but the strategist rushed forward, eyes sharp, jaw tight. Julian, Sophie, Bianchi just issued a statement. They stopped. The strategist held out a phone. The message was short, clean, surgical. Tell the chef, I am not finished. And beneath it, a live photograph. Sophie's catering. Kitchen door unlocked, lights off, someone inside, moving shadows. Sophie felt her blood turn to ice. Not fear for herself, but fear for the people she loved. Her staff. Her closest friend Emma. Julian reacted first. His voice went quiet. Too quiet. We go now. The city blurred. The car moved fast. Streetlights flashing like warnings. Sophie's heart hammered, her breath tight, but her resolve did not break. They arrived. The street was empty. The front door was open. A bowl rolled slowly across the floor as if nudged by a hand. No longer present. Sophie stepped across the threshold. Julian's presence, a solid shadow at her back. The kitchen was silent. Too silent. Silence like a held blade. Then from the far corner a sound. A breath. A trembling whisper. Sophie, help. Emma. Sophie ran Julian behind her. No thought. No hesitation. And there in the cold glow of fluorescent light, Emma sat on the floor, hands, shaking, eyes wide, as though she had seen something she could not name. He left something, she whispered, her voice cracking. He said it was a gift on. The stainless steel workstation lay a single object, a chef's knife. Clean knife, edge gleaming, and carved into the metal with a precision meant to haunt. Was Sophie's childhood foster name. The one she had not spoken in 10 years. The one she had buried. The one no one in this life should know. The past had not returned. It had been dragged to the surface, and now it was staring at her with a smile carved in steel. The war had begun. The story ends. Where the truth begins. Sophie stood in the kitchen, staring at the knife that carried the name she had tried to bury. The name of the girl who had slept in group home bunks. The girl who had learned to cook as a way to survive. The girl the world never saw. The girl she had sworn would never be dragged back into the light. Julian stood behind her. His presence was solid, steady, a wall refusing to fall. Emma trembled on the floor, her hands shaking, her eyes wide with shock. He said, "The past always comes back," she whispered. He said you would understand what that meant. Sophie did understand, and that was what made her chest tighten like a closing fist. Bianchi did not want money. He did not want victory in business. He wanted to break her spirit, to make her remember what it felt like to be powerless. Sophie sank to her knees beside Emma, holding her gently, speaking softly. You are safe. He cannot hurt you. Not while I am here. Julian turned off the lights. The kitchen went quiet. The city hummed faint behind the windows. He looked at Sophie. No anger now. Only something deeper. Tell me, he said, tell me what this name means. Sophie breathed slowly. For the first time, she let the memories rise rather than burying them. I was born. Sophie Laurent only on paper. My first foster home, the one before everything changed, called me. Mina. Mina was hungry every day. Mina fought every day. Mina was alone. I worked so hard to leave that girl behind. I thought if I changed my name, I could erase the pain. But I never erased her. I just hid her. And now Bianchi wants to use her as a weapon. Julian knelt in front of her, his hands on her face. Soft, steady. Loving. You survived things most people could never even imagine. You became your own strength, your own future. You did not bury Mina. You grew her. And now she stands here, as the woman who owns this kitchen, this life, this love, this family. Sophie closed her eyes and the fear loosened. Not gone, but no longer in control. We finish this, she said. Not running, not hiding. We end it. Julian nodded, his voice low, controlled. Then we end it tonight. They moved with purpose. Not rage, not panic. Purpose. The car cut through the city. The sky hung heavy and dark. Clouds like stone. The old warehouse. Where Bianchi had once held, his parties stood abandoned now. But one light burned inside. A signal. A challenge. A dare they entered together. Hand in hand. Not as a billionaire and a chef, but as two survivors who had learned how to rise. Bianchi waited. In the center of the empty room, his smile cold, his eyes sharp. So the girl comes home, he said. Sophie stepped forward, not shaking now, not small, not. Mina. Sophie. No, she said. The girl walked out years ago. This is the woman who replaced her. Bianchi laughed, but the laugh had no strength, no certainty. He tried to threaten, to taunt, to twist her past into chains. But the more he spoke, the more she realized he was not powerful. He was afraid. Sophie walked closer, her voice steady. You thought my past made me weak, but my past made me impossible to break. You cannot win against someone who has already survived the worst thing they will ever face. Julian stepped beside her, and the room shifted. Power moved. Bianchi saw it, and his expression cracked. Security. Entered officials followed evidence handed over. Everything. Bianchi feared. Everything he had run from was already in motion. He lost, not because Julian crushed him, but because Sophie refused to fall. When they walked out of the building, the night air felt new, full alive. Later, on the rooftop of their home city lights, glowing like stars that forgot how to leave the ground, Julian wrapped his arms around her from behind his chin, resting near her shoulder. You once said you did not belong in my world, he murmured. But this city is ours now. You are not the girl who never belonged. You are the woman who remade her place. Sophie touched her stomach gently, feeling the quiet beginning of the life growing there. Our child will know love, she whispered. Love that is chosen. Love that is earned. Love that is strong. Julian held her closer, and the city breathed around them. This was the ending, not of struggle, but of fear. The girl in the cheap dress, the foster child, the orphan had become the woman every room now watched the woman who walked beside power, not behind it, never beneath it. Sophie Laurent Hayes belonged, and this time she knew it forever.